Well, good morning. This is Pastor Marvin Osborne with First Baptist Church of Birmingham, Ohio. This is our second lesson in the Pastor's Bible class. This is different from our daily devotionals and our Sunday sermons. This is more of an in-depth study on the book of James. I teach this on Sunday nights, and I had some of my, or at least one of my workers who said, um, I want to know what you're teaching on Sunday night, but I'm working in our Sunday night Awandan program. And she asked me if I could tape this, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Not only for her, but for all who are incapable of being here on Sunday night, and really for everyone that really values the ministry and values God's Word from First Baptist Church. And so it'll help you, whether you're in North Carolina or Florida or Washington State or wherever, so that you can gain from this information of knowing the book of James in a more in-depth environment. And so we're going to take our time as we go through it, and we're going to publish this weekly, and so that you can grab onto it, and I hope you'll look forward to it. I hope you'll receive something from it, and you'll share it with other people. My goal is to help you grow in Jesus Christ. And so here we are. Last week we talked about James chapter 1. We talked about the introduction of who James was, that he was the half brother of Jesus Christ. He had the same mother but different fathers, of course, right? James James's father was Joseph, Mary's husband, but that Joseph wasn't Jesus' father, was he? And so we talked about that. We talked about how initially that he was an unbeliever, but after the resurrection of his half brother Jesus Christ, his life changed. James became a believer in Jesus Christ, so much so that he identifies himself as a servant of Jesus Christ. He went from an unbeliever, but now he saw his role in this world as serving Jesus Christ, and he became the leader of the Jerusalem Council, and eventually he became martyred for Jesus Christ. So his life drastically changed. And so we talked about the theme and so forth, and now we're picking up in verse 2, where he says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations," or various trials. He says that we are to count it all joy. Now, we often count joy as really, trials as the struggles of life, the trials of life as a deficit. We get that diagnosis. We get where a car breaks down on the side of the road, whatever it is. We always think that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to us. But James is saying we need to look at it from a different way. He's talking about my brother, and so he's talking to fellow believers. Count it all joy. He's using an accounting term. He says instead of putting it in the deficit side, we ought to put it on the positive side. This is an investment in your account. You have a choice of, when you go to the bank, you can either deposit money or you can withdraw money, right? He says, look at this as a spiritual deposit into your life. God is working on you. He says, count it all joy. All joy. We used to say that joy stands for Jesus first, others second, yourself last, right? And but he's not saying here, count it all happiness. Don't be happy when things come. Who's going to be happy when you get that diagnosis from the doctor? Well, you're not happy, are you? And nor should you be. But we can count it all joy. Why? Because God is in control. There is joy in knowing that nothing can happen to me apart from what God allows it to be. Look back at the book of Job. Look back at the life of Joseph in the Old Testament. He says, although his brothers desired to do evil to him, God meant it for good. And the same is true for you and I, that all things work together for good to those who love Christ, and are called according to his purposes. And so if you're a believer, you know what? We count it all joy because God is in control. He has a purpose for this. He says when you fall into diverse temptations or trials, the idea is that you get up in the morning, you do what you normally do. You get up and you read your Bible and you say your prayers and you take care of your kids and you go off to work, and all of a sudden something happens. You didn't bring it on yourself. It was something that God allowed to happen. Now, he's not saying here that he's not saying those things that we bring onto ourselves. You decide you're going to pick a fight with your spouse, and all of a sudden you have a bad day because you decided you were going to be ornery that day. That's not brought on by God, right? I mean, he certainly allows it, but you brought that on yourself. You've been driving on those bald tires for a long time, and everybody's been telling you to you change your tires, and you refuse to do so, and all of a sudden you get a flat. Well, that's your fault, right? We look at the life of David and the trials that came because of his adultery and with Bathsheba, loss of that child. His daughter ended up being raped. He lost his kingdom for a period. And you kind of go through the different things that David went through because of his own sin. He brought that on himself. But then there were, you look at Joseph, as we said before, who was sold into slavery and falsely accused of rape and imprisoned. And, well, God allowed that. It wasn't because of Joseph's sin. It was because of what God allowed to happen in his life to prepare him to be the prime minister of Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world during that time. He says these things are happening not because we've sinned, but because God has allowed it to occur. If you've ever followed Christ, you understand that. You get up and everything's going right. You're doing what you know is right, and all of a sudden the rug is pulled out and the trials come. I know that's happened in my life where I was doing everything right and seemingly I wasn't perfect, and all of a sudden the rug in my life was pulled out and I was devastated. I'm telling you, I was devastated. And he says here that we are to count it all joy. Why? Because even though I was devastated, I wasn't happy. Happy comes from the root word of happened, where circumstances can either make us happy or make us sad, right? He's saying, so it's not that that happening, that thing was going to make me happy, but it was joyful because I turned to the Lord. I went to the Lord. I didn't go to the bar. I didn't go look for another wife. I didn't go looking for this or that. I went to the Lord, as we all should. He says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Believers are not to be murmuring and complaining, but filled with joy. There's still a song in my heart because God is in control. He goes, why? How can we be joyful? He says, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, James 1:3. He says, knowing, that idea of first-hand knowledge. It comes from gnosko in the Greek. He's saying here that you know this. You know this. You've experienced trials before, and God has always seen you through it. He said you know this, either from first-hand knowledge or from watching others. You know this, that the trying of the testing of your faith worketh patience. Worketh patience. You've seen God work in the past, and so you know God is going to see you through this. And we can be joyful in knowing that we are going to get through this. You and I have to understand that. Remember the passage in Hebrews where the Bible talks about Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Well, it wasn't the cross that brought joy into to Jesus, but it was beyond the cross. What the cross was going to mean to the world. It was the fact that he was doing this to fulfill his purposes for being here, the salvation of man. He looked beyond the trial for the joy that was set before us. And you and I are called to do the same thing. The testing of our faith worketh patience or endurance. And so he says that you and I are to, that the more we grow, the more we go through, and we go through, through Christ, the more we, the more faith and endurance we build. Faith is like a muscle, isn't it? That endurance, the more we exercise that muscle, the stronger it becomes. And the same is true for our walk with Jesus Christ. When we endure the trials, the stronger we get in Christ. He says, but let patience, remember he says, the trying or the testing of your faith worketh patience. He says, or endurance. He says, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. The only way to go through these trials that come our way is to go through it. James says to let. Don't resist. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't walk away. Don't ruin your testimony because you've hit a little headwind in your life. He says that you are to let patience, let endurance have its perfect work in you, that ye may be perfect or spiritually mature, entire, wanting nothing. Trials perfect us. Trials complete us. Trials mature us. Maturity comes. Listen to this. Maturity comes through the doorway of trials. If you see spiritually mature people in your church, let me guarantee you they've been through some stuff. They've been through some stuff. They've been through life, and life has been through them. Amen? He says you are to be, allow these things so that you can become spiritually mature. Entire, that word entire comes from the same word which we get the word holocaros, which is the word where we get the word hollow or hologram, which means that God is more interested in our character than he is our comfort. That trial begins to mature us, like that hologram, 360 degrees. He desires to make us mature, not only physically, but spiritually and socially and emotionally. He says, why? Because at the end of this road, not at the end of the trial, because this is just one step in your sanctification process, but at the end of the road, when you've been through trial after trial after trial, you're going to be complete, entire, lacking nothing. You're going to be exactly the way God wants you to be. He says, but if you have if you're having trouble accepting all that's going on, why is this going on? He says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given to him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He says, if you're struggling with the trials you're going through, ask God. Ask God. Ask God why. Number one, I think if we're going through a trial, we need to ask God, is it because of sin? Is this happening because there's sin in my life? And we need to examine ourselves to see if there's sin in our lives. Like we talked about King David when he sinned with Bathsheba. Everything that he was going through was because of his sin, right? And the same is true for us. We need to examine. But if there is no sin, God's not showing us that we're sin, not that we're perfect, but then we know that we're going through this because he is allowing it. And so now we ask God for wisdom in what we should do. God, which way should I go? Which doctor should I go to? Is there someone I need to minister to while I'm going through this? Wisdom. Seek God. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 3, 5 through 7, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. He's saying that when we ask God, he will direct us. He says, let him ask of God that giveth to all men and women liberally and upbraideth not. But if you ask, he says you need to be not like a faithless man, not like the double-minded man, but if you ask and God's going to give you wisdom, then we need to obey what he's showing us to do, right? And so if he's showing us that we need to go left instead of right and so forth, we need to be willing to do what he has shown us to do. He says, for let not that man that think he shall receive anything of the Lord, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He's like a wave that comes and a wave that goes. He's up and he's down. He's all over the place. He says, these trials have a purpose. And you and I must understand that if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, trials are not the exception. They're the norm, because God is still working on us. We used to sing that song, didn't we? God's still working on me to make me just like he wants me to be, or whatever how that song we used to sing. And it's so true. God's still working on you. If you're alive, God, and you're a follower of Christ, you're a child of God, God is still working on you. So we don't have to be shamed when we go through trials. Understand that I'm a child of God, and He's going to shape my character into making me what he wants me to be. Now, let me tell you, remember I told you about that story where all of a sudden my world was taken apart. I mean, it was shaken to its core. And I tell you what, it wasn't pleasant, and it took a long time for me to get through that. But you know what? I'm a better pastor today than I was. I'm a better communicator of the Word of God than I used to be. I'm more compassionate than I used to be towards people who struggles and so forth. God used that trial in my life to bring me where I am today. And do I want to go back again? I don't think so. But I'm thankful for it. There's joy in knowing that the outcome is much better than when I started that trial in the first place. The Bible says that if we ask God, when we go through this time, but when we go through the trials, he will give us wisdom. He will give it to us generously, and we can trust him. Remember the old saying that even when you can't see the hand of God, we can trust the heart of God. You'd say, Pastor, how do I know? How do I go get wisdom? You get wisdom from God's word. You're praying, God, show me what I need to do, and then you spend time in God's word. You spend time with God's people. You need to be in the house of God, don't you? You need to be where you are. So many people fall away. They get upset. They get ashamed, and they fall away and thinking that they're the only one like that. I remember being in a church like that as a young believer, and I looked around and everybody looked like they had their act together. You know, that's the Baptist way, because you don't share the trials that you're going through. You think that your family's the only one to act this way. Argued on the way to going to church, right? But you know what? We're not alone. And I don't think we're supposed to walk through this world alone. We're not supposed to pull back. Listen, in Ohio, we get these strong winds off the lake here, off of Lake Erie, and the winds come and the snow's coming, and sometimes you get out of church on a Sunday night and that wind is blowing, that snow is blowing, and you see your car and you have to put one foot in front of the other, and you put your head down and you just get whatever you can do to get to that car. And the same is true in our Christian life. We need to maybe lean into it. Put one foot in front of the other. Don't be ashamed. You go to God's word. You go to God's house. You go to God's people, and you listen as you pray for God's still small voice. Listen to what God's telling you. My Bible says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Hebrews 11:6. Our faith is put to the test. We continue to believe God. Whew! That's a good message today, isn't it? Because I guarantee you that someone I'm talking to today is going through a trial, is going through a test. And it's knocked you to your knees like it's knocked me down many times. But my Bible says that a wise man, falls down 7 times, but he gets back up. Friends, get up. Get up. Get up in your word. Get up in the house of God. Get around God's people. Get on your knees and pray, and you listen to what God is telling you. Amen? Amen. This is Pastor Marvin Osborne of First Baptist Church of Birmingham, Ohio, teaching from the Pastor's Bible class on the book of James, telling you God loves you and I love you as well. I'll talk to you soon.